think this gets left out of a lot of discussions, that the empire is fighting for its life right now, and the time is not on its side, and it is trying its best to prevent the emergence of a fairer world order or the global south, and therefore it won't yield. Why is it so hard for people to understand that this is not just an attack on Iran, but this is an attack on China, on Russia, BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and all of the Latin American organizations, the African Union? Why is it so hard for people to connect those dots to understand that when it comes to the empire, her tentacles are everywhere, and she understands that she has to do these things in order to keep the empire going?
Well, that is exactly right. And this is because people are missing this because they're listening to political rhetoric, which is deliberately designed to mislead and misinform people and to sway people in the wrong direction. We constantly refer to these policy papers. We make the links to them available. A lot of these papers are publicly available. They weren't leaked. They were made public. So the plans are out there. And they depend on American people ignoring that. 170 pages of academic English talking about complex subjects most Americans don't understand very well, versus just listening to appealing rhetoric coming out of a slick politician. They are very confident that Americans and people around the globe, more times than not, are going to choose that rhetoric over the reality that is, again, on these policy papers. And you're absolutely right. We have been talking about this forever. We have been talking about how the U.S. is behind schedule. They're rushing. They see the window of opportunity closing to reassert primacy over the planet. And they're reckless, they're desperate, and they're extremely dangerous. That's what we just watched, this attack on Iran. This is something that ideally they probably would have wanted to launch under more ideal conditions. They have no more time. They see China rising exponentially, and they understand that they need to complete this pivot from their proxy war against Russia through Ukraine to a similar conflict with China in the Asia Pacific. They needed to weaken or severely destroy Iran on the way over to the Asia Pacific. They need to avoid being mired in the Middle East. And then they have this uphill battle to fight against China itself. And they're putting all of the pieces together. They're rushing this very quickly. Look at how they did this. We lived through the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003. We remember them taking all of this time to go to the UN, to pretend that they were going through the whole process, to legitimize it, to justify it, to create a sufficient pretext for it. They did none of that. They had President Trump say, I don't care what U.S. intelligence says. I don't care what the intelligence is. We're bombing Iran. That's what we're doing. And then he played a music video after he bombed Iran in tribute to longtime warmonger, neocon, Senator John McCain, who's now dead. But that was something that he, in public, at a podium, sang to the public. These are psychopaths, sociopathic people who belong nowhere near power, and yet they have their hands on the most powerful nation, economy, and military. It is in decline. They know it. They're desperate, and they're extremely dangerous. And now we see how this is manifesting itself. Contrary to everybody's hope that President Trump was going to fight the deep state, it's very clear that he's an eager servant of the deep state.
And another thing, what are your thoughts on this, Brian? Trump initiates the war with Iran. He begs for a pause in the war with Iran, and then he gets nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, and yet he is still allowing weapons to be funneled to Ukraine to fight Russia. How, in the sane world, how is that even possible?
Well, the Nobel Peace Prize has always been a joke. Serial war criminals have been the recipients. Obvious U.S. sock puppets have received it. Aung San Suu Kyi of Myanmar, for example, is a creation of U.S. and British intelligence de facto installed into power before the military in Myanmar ousted her regime, which was literally run by there were white guys just walking around Myanmar as her administrators and de facto ministers, like British viceroys just strutting through old-time Burma back in the age of the British Empire. and she has a Nobel Peace Prize. And so all of these horrible people, the Peace Prize is just a way to whitewash these people, to present a horrible person as a good person to the public. They are manufacturing legitimacy as much as they are manufacturing consent for their many wars of aggression. So it doesn't surprise me at all that there's this talk of a Nobel Peace Prize for President Trump, who has taken every single war that he was handed by the Biden administration, has continued all of them, expanded them actually, and now has started new wars that the Biden, Obama, and Bush Jr. administrations could only have dreamed of starting during their time in office. So it's continuity of agenda, just as we warned.
And what do you think that this has done to his base? Because he's always trumpeted Joe Biden. These are Joe Biden wars. Joe Biden, if I had been president, this would not have happened. And now we see that, as you said, not only has he continued on with their wars, but he's expanded it, and he is looking to expand them even further. So, what do you think that has done to his MAGA base, the part of the base that said they voted for him because they wanted no more foreign wars and military entanglements around the world?
7 months ago, I produced a video warning people that this is exactly what was going to happen. This was before President Trump actually was inaugurated as U.S. president. And I said, people in his support base are going to be divided into two camps. One camp is the camp of anger, realizing that they have been duped, anger, and these are people with courage and integrity who will admit that they made a mistake placing their support in President Trump, and they will be angry and they will oppose his policies. You will have the other camp, which is the camp of delusion, and these are people who will descend into increasing layers of delusion to try to explain how somehow they were still right, even though they are completely and continuously wrong. And we see examples of both of this in the general public, even within the alternative media, people who are applying these 10D interdimensional chess moves that they think President Trump is executing, which just coincidentally looks like continuity of agenda that everyone warned about and that is detailed in these policy papers. So, you know, it's a combination of things. They don't want to be wrong. They have pride. They have ego that is overwhelming their conscience and their ability to do the right thing no matter what. It's human nature, and they're caving into it, which is extremely unfortunate. Unfortunately, there is a certain segment of the Trump support base who, I don't know how else to describe it, they're just racist idiots, and they have much joy and hope that the U.S. will wage these wars against, you know, brown people around the globe who they think deserve to be bombed and subjugated by American primacy. And these people, you can see, they're very happy and very proud that the United States bombs Iran. And you have to think about it from the American point of view of these type of people. What is going on in the U.S.? Nothing. They're not building anything. They're not going anywhere. The country is literally rotting out from underneath them. And the only thing that they have to be proud of or look forward to is destroying somebody else's country. And unfortunately, the U.S. has created this mindset, and they are deliberately cultivating it to create a support base for these forever wars that we see are still being waged under the Trump administration.
What do you think about the leadership in the U.S.? Do you think that they are reflecting on the all of the missteps that they've made? Because desperation breeds desperate acts. And as you pointed out, 30 years ago, America would have put on this front and went before the UN. But now we see that as time moves on, they're becoming more desperate, and they're just resorting to pure power and piracy and all around the world. And it's starting to alienate even more people. So they're trying to force people to stay on board of the so-called rules-based order, but the mask is coming off, and it is showing her the empire as it is. Do you think that the leadership of the U.S. and the West are reflecting on it, or they're just insane and they're just trying to keep their rule?
Yeah, they're just sprinting at this point. It's just a mad sprint. They're going to focus on that percentage, whatever it is. Unfortunately, I think it's a pretty high percentage of the Western public, not just the American public, the Western public that they have cultivated to be irrational, racist, belligerent, angry at the rest of the world, to blame the rest of the world for all of their own ills, even though it's their own government and own special interests that have created the conditions they think is China's fault. Oh, China, look at their beautiful cities and their infrastructure, world-class infrastructure. They took that from us. No, you never had anything like that. And you never will have anything like that as long as you allow these people to lie to you into thinking China somehow is the reason you don't have those nice things. You could have those nice things. Your nation spends trillions of dollars on wars overseas. China has risen this 21st century without firing a single shot at another country or invading another country. Is unprecedented in human history. The rise of a global superpower without waging war and invading others and taking what they have. They built that on their own. That is unique. It is an example set for the rest of the world. If Americans could see through the propaganda that's blinding them, they would see China not as some sort of enemy that they inevitably have to go to war with. They would see China as an example to follow if they want to enjoy all of these same things. And so it's unfortunate, but yes, I think we're just watching a mad dash. These people are extremely dangerous. I recommend that people do not underestimate how dangerous they are, their capacity for death and destruction around the world, and their capacity to sacrifice their proxies, of which they have many. I think we will eventually talk about Europe and the 5% of their GDP they will now be spending on arms, ammunition, just as President Trump said that they would, as Secretary Hegseth said back in February, they would. They are now doing that. They will go through these proxies. Then they will have the American people themselves pay the price. The people actually driving these policies will be the very last people to pay the consequences for them. So this is incredibly dangerous.
My first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just